What's up, everybody? Welcome to Fantasy Football Today, DFS. My name is Sia Najad, and of course, as usual, I'm joined by Meg Schaub and Mike McClure. Meg and Mike, this is, I guess, our final show of the season. I mean, I don't know how it wouldn't be with one game left. Mike, I'll start with you. It's your Kansas City Chiefs. We're going to be talking, listen, game predictions, maybe some talking points when it comes to props, but obviously this is going to be a DFS heavy show, but it's going to be pretty conversational. So if you have any questions, certainly let us know. Mike, Kansas City, they're back in this thing. I mean, this feels like, I think I heard Eric Casillas say it earlier, maybe he got it from somebody else. It feels like the Super Bowl is the Patrick Mahomes Invitational because it's just like more of the same. So how are you feeling about this game?
I'm very excited for it. See, I think we get another classic, kind of like we did the first time these teams met in the Super Bowl most recently. Now, I don't know that it'll be as high scoring as that matchup was, but I think it's going to be a good game because you look at the way Kansas City plays, they don't really blow anyone out ever, right? So there's certainly a scenario where Philly wins in a blowout, but I don't see Kansas City winning a blowout. So I think we're in for a very competitive game just because of how these two teams play. Very excited for it, though. I think it's a great DFS game.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in just a second. Meg, and Mike knows this, when the 49ers were playing the Chiefs, when anybody's playing the Chiefs, I always lean the other way. And it's always because I'm like, I haven't seen enough from Kansas City this year. I think they're falling off. Like 3 years ago, I was like, they don't have Tyreek Hill. Kelsey's getting older. Such and such team is good. I got to be honest. I like the Eagles to squeak out a win here, but I feel like I'm just always on the wrong side of it. So anything from a game prediction standpoint, how do you think this game is going to go?
I'm very similar to you. I've done the exact same thing. And so far, I kind of feel the exact same way that I am on the Eagles, in that I think every conversation about the Super Bowl this week has been, it's kind of the better roster versus the better quarterback and coach, right? I mean, I'm not saying anything that anybody hasn't said a million times already, but it's true. And so I kind of do think the Eagles win. But again, nothing would surprise me. It's Mahomes, it's Andy Reid. So that's likely how I'll be playing it. But yeah, nothing will surprise me.
Mike, let's start with some like game scripts, and before we get into maybe specific players, although we can highlight specific players too, and Meg, you and Mike will kind of toggle back and forth here. Is there maybe a couple of primary game scripts through your simulations that you've thought, all right, this is kind of what I'm going with? And I know that's such a broad question, but when you're looking at some of the lineups that you liked initially, or that you continue to like initially, where have those game scripts kind of headed?
Yeah, so I think there are many ways that you can build here. I'm still building mostly for competitive games, so I'm mostly balanced. So basically like 3 3s and 4 2s in terms of, players from each team. I'm not getting a ton of 5 1s. When I look at it, though, the thing that I think is most interesting is the rushing ability of Jalen Hurts. There are many scenarios where Jalen Hurts just outscores Patrick Mahomes while you are loaded with Kansas City pass catchers, right? So just because of the rushing upside and because of that tush push at the goal line and rushing touchdowns being so valuable. So some of the builds that I'm making will maybe seem like some heavy negative correlation, meaning like Jalen Hurts captain, but against the Kansas City defense and things like that. So I'm getting a lot of Hurts, but with a lot of the Kansas City pieces attached to Jalen Hurts.
Meg, I kind of like Hurts in this game. I think more than anybody, and we'll talk about some captains that you all like more than others. But I think Jalen Hurts can get there in multiple ways. I mean, obviously, if the Chiefs sell out and try to stop Saquon Barkley, which I tend to think they need to do, because I think the way this Kansas City rush defense has been over the last month, 6 weeks, I mean, you can kind of 5-6 yards them to death, and you could have Saquon Barkley just milk clock and ultimately score some touchdowns. I think Jalen Hurts can get there via the tush push, via the rushing yards, which I think he's projected for around 40 rushing yards. I think he can score touchdowns with his legs, obviously, but I also think if you sell out and try to stop Saquon Barkley, I mean, you could see some single coverage with guys like Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown. We all know Dallas Goedert might get some volume as well, but I think there's multiple paths to Jalen Hurts. And I like what Mike said about maybe having Jalen Hurts in the captain position, and then just kind of like loading up on Chiefs. That doesn't mean no Eagles beyond Jalen Hurts, but I think we could see a huge Jalen Hurts game in a few of the primary pass catchers like Xavier Worthy or Travis Kelce really get there as well. How are you like in terms of like primary game scripts, primary builds? What are you looking at?
Yeah, I have been playing around with lineups with the Eagles to win, and basically all coming through Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. Similar to the Washington game, it wouldn't shock me if however many Eagles touchdowns are scored, that they are all on the ground from Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. Now, I'm not ruling out, obviously, Jalen Hurts passing touchdowns or anything like that. I'm just saying that would not surprise me at all. So I'm kind of really building with those two in all my lineups. And one of them, I've been playing around with one of them as the captain, and then just making it work from either another Eagles piece and then filling in with the Chiefs pieces. Because there, as Mike said, there's a lot of low price Chiefs pieces. You know, Butker is obviously the kicker can outscore some of the players that he's priced near. So, I like Butker. I like some of those cheaper Chiefs pieces, maybe one expensive Chiefs piece like Kelce. We saw obviously what tight ends in the playoffs have done to the Eagles. I know we say that about the Chiefs, but both teams have good tight end matchups essentially. So, that's my very long way of saying I like Hurts and Saquon, and I'm going to do a lot of Hurts and Saquon together, and then fill it out from there. And I like both, alternating both of them in the captain.
Mike, we've got some comments in the chat that I think are worth talking about. First of all, Josh Lucero says, if KC is trailing, could Worthy catch 7 to 10 balls and 100-yard bonus? That's a question. I absolutely think that's in play. Xavier Worthy's my favorite play. We'll get to that in just a little bit. We've got Grey Goose Hayes that says, I think KC's luck finally runs out and Philly blows them out. That's a range of outcome. That's certainly within the range of outcomes, but we got to stop calling it KC luck at this point. I mean, there's just too much of a sample size. And I've been guilty of that too. But at this point, this team is just good and absolutely knows how to close. Let's see. James A. Okay, so this is a good stopping point question. Who to put in the captain position is the $1 million question. So, Mike, here's the thing. When I ran an optimizer, it was pretty conservative in terms of I didn't really mess with any of the tools. I just kind of ran it. Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Dallas Goedert, Travis Kelce came up. I'd like to add Xavier Worthy to that mix because I do think he could be – I think people still perceive him as sort of like the long play threat. That's very much not what he is. He's the guy that could absolutely catch 5, 6, 7 balls and take a wide receiver screen or a quick slant to the house. With that said, captain position, Mike, what were some of your favorites? Who's popping up?
Yeah, I'll just read some of the exposures when I basically have it build 2,000 lineups and just look and see how often everyone's coming in. No surprise, Saquon Barkley is going to be the top in terms of the most optimal. I've got him up to 28%. Then Patrick Mahomes, 23. Xavier Worthy is third, though. He comes in actually ahead of Jalen Hurts in terms of being optimal, which I found to be interesting because I would not have put that there, if I was talking about it or thinking through it manually. But then it is Jalen Hurts. So it's Barkley, Mahomes, Worthy, Hurts, and then Kelce would be the top 5 there. After that, I'm getting very low exposure, but still getting a little A.J. Brown, a little Goddard, a little Smith. And that is basically it. The one that I found to be pretty interesting is I'm not getting any Kareem Hunt, really. Like 2% out of 2,000 lineups, like 2%. And I think that is interesting because he does still touch the football in the red zone, and it is still very possible that he scores 2 touchdowns in this game. So I'm not going to have Kareem Hunt at the captain, which will be, again, potentially interesting to see, but I wasn't getting a lot of them at flex either. So basically that's where I'm going to be most vulnerable is to any Kansas City rushing touchdowns, because I'm not going to have any Kansas City running backs.
I was thinking about, because we were talking about Super Bowl MVP. I was talking Super Bowl MVP with Josh Ingles from Covers yesterday, and actually with Emory Hunt and Kiana Martin on HQ. And I was trying to come up, I like Jalen Hurts at plus 350 because I think the number's kind of obnoxious. Whether I'm a Jalen Hurts fan or not, plus 350 for a quarterback is a little silly to me. With that said, I was trying to come up with arguments for Xavier Worthy as MVP. That was around 26-1, but Kareem Hunt at 60-1. And listen, it's 60-1 for a reason, right? But Mike, my follow-up question to the Kareem Hunt thing is, A, I think putting him in the captain position is interesting if nobody's going to play him. And B, if you're going to do that, don't you have to do that with the Kansas City defense? Because to me, the only way that comes through is if we're creating short fields for Kareem Hunt, and that's stymieing the pass attempts from Patrick Mahomes, which obviously lessens the exposure to, Xavier Worthy, Travis Kelce, short fields by the defense, Kareem Hunt kind of running in some short touchdowns. Would that be the way to think about a Kareem Hunt captain lineup?
I think it could be, yes. I also think it would be, for me personally, it would be more of a shootout game that it would get there.
Gotcha.
Just, having enough volume, enough scoring there. So in a low scoring game, it's definitely possible. And again, that's where I'm going to be most vulnerable, right? If that happens and it's a 2 touchdown game for Kareem Hunt, I'm probably going to lose everything I enter in this spot. Now, to protect against that, I will, which we've talked about this a couple times, over the years, really through certain things. I don't mind playing a Kareem Hunt anytime touchdown plus 150 or better. As sort of a little hedge there. There is zero scenario that Kareem Hunt is optimal number 1, but even needed if he doesn't score a touchdown. There's just no volume. There's no passing volume. There's nothing there to where he's not scoring 10 fantasy points without landing in the end zone, right? It's essentially impossible in this game. So at plus 150, I will be sprinkling a little on the anytime touchdown because I'm not going to get him in DFS. And that's just going to be how I personally handle this situation with him.
Meg, before I get to you, a couple of comments. First of all, Andrew Raub, I think I'm pronouncing that last name right, says, Meg, Mike, see you. 3 of my favorite people to listen to for betting and DFS underdog dailies. God bless you all. And let's go Chiefs. Boo those Eagles. I mean, listen, I'm not an Eagles guy. This is Mike. Go ahead.
I didn't think you were going to read the last sentence, the last part of that comment. I thought it was going to get cut off somehow.
Well, I know Andrew. He's a diehard Washington fan like us, so he it turns his stomach to think of the Eagles winning. But I'm sure he's supporting Mike too.
I kind of can't stand the Eagles, if I'm being honest. Anywhere where I feel like I'm in danger going to their stadium and rooting for my team, it's just I'm not going to be a big fan of that. And anybody who says that I'm being hyperbolic, I don't know what to tell you. I just don't think you're in tune to what's actually going on. Podson says fantasy football season is over, but Andrew says fantasy football season is never over if you play best ball. Meg Schaup, which right. You absolutely do. Okay, so let's talk favorite captain plays. We heard a couple from Mike, and we'll toggle back and forth maybe with a couple of more and some game scripts and some contrarian game scripts. But any favorite captains for you, Meg?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way Mike listed it out makes perfect sense. Like I agree. I kind of co-sign that. I'm playing less lineup, so I'm probably going to pick and choose and kind of focus on the Eagles side. Hurts, Saquon, and Goddard are going to be my 3 top captains. It's still filling it in with, probably like you said, it's going to be a balanced 3-3 most likely. May get a little contrarian and do some 4-2 Eagles because I think that will be a lower own. But I think I'm focusing on those 3 just because I'm not playing as much total volume.
Yeah, I like the 4-2 builds quite a bit on the Eagles side. I mean, what's interesting is, Mike, with the Eagles, it's pretty condensed, right? And with Kansas City, you're having to take a few more chances. So do you in showdowns, are you more inclined to go to that condensed target show, or because it's showdown, you're more inclined to actually kind of go against the grain and go with some guys that people just aren't really playing as much because they don't know what the volume is going to be?
It really does depend on the slate for me. See, pricing typically dictates everything for me. They're really not going to be a blanket approach, but I will say I am more likely to, in those Eagles heavy lineups, it is likely to be some of the big guns there. So like I've got a couple looks here with Jalen Hurts captain where I've actually triple stacked it. AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Goddard, and no Saquon, essentially just building for that scenario where Kansas City is somehow able to stack the box successfully and have a little success offensively, putting Hurts in that position where he's got to throw and obviously use his legs, where he ultimately does still outscore Patrick Mahomes.
So that's interesting because I think some people will think, especially new showdown players, will think that's a little counterintuitive in the sense that they're thinking, all right, well, all these Eagles are going to score. That must mean the Kansas City Chiefs are going to score a ton. Don't I need Kansas City Chiefs there? So what's your reaction to that?
You'll definitely have 2 Kansas City Chiefs, as the other 2 spots in your roster. As far as where you go with them, I think there are a number of options. Again, keep in mind you can play kickers. We have absolutely perfect conditions in a dome. We've got great range from Harrison Butker. And Kansas City, while they've been a good football team overall, analytically, they're not always super sharp there. They will kick the long field goal at times and put points on the board. So definitely something to note in Showdown that could be the build you're looking at.
All right. I'm looking at ownership. Again, ownership can vary, especially with what do we have? 4 days to go, 3.5 days to go for the Super Bowl. It's looking like Patrick Mahomes, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, all over 50%. Xavier Worthy kind of trending to that 50% range. Are there any lower owned plays? And lower owned in Showdown, I mean, I'm really talking like 40% or lower, although you can go super contrarian if you like. Are there any lower owned plays that you're finding like, hey, I'm just going to end up playing these guys? Like, for example, Kareem Hunt's only 26%. Hollywood Brown is 35%. We could go to the kickers and players like that. Juju, 15%. Pacheco, Noah Gray, all sub 15%. P. Ryan, 11%. Any of those players jumping out to you to kind of help make your lineup? Because you are probably going to need some low cost options as well.
Yeah, both from low cost and low ownership. I like a lot of those options. I'm with Mike. I'm not in on the Kansas City running game. So I'm not really, targeting Hunt or Pacheco. So those are out for me, but I do have interest. Juju Smith-Schuster got, 2 big catches last game. Could absolutely see. I think he's running the 3rd most routes, low ownership there. Noah Gray did not run as many routes, but the way the Eagles play defense and cover 4, cover 6 per fantasy points, this is kind of where Noah Gray can excel. So Andy Reid's a very smart coach. I think maybe that we'd see a little more 12 personnel and we get a little more Noah Gray routes. If so, you're getting super low price, super low ownership, and then Noah Gray. I don't even mind doing Kelsey and Noah Gray. How many people are going to do that? Stuff like that is stuff, 2 running backs from the same team, 2 tight ends from the same team. Stuff like that is unique. So Noah Gray, Juju are 2 of my lower, and then I'll just throw out Goddard is like, I think 35%. So I definitely like Goddard as well.
Mike, I know in the prop market, you were looking earlier in the week or last week at DeAndre Hopkins. Is he a guy you're willing to put into your lineup? I'm looking at his price. It's $4,400, which frankly is a little bit more expensive than I would have anticipated. But he's super low owned, which makes sense. Any thoughts on D-Hop or any of those other low cost options?
Yeah, I like D-Hop. I'm way more likely to play him than, say, someone like Isaiah Pacheco at 5,200, I believe he is. And the reason for that is, yes, the target volume is fallen off a cliff for Hopkins. However, he is still on the field in the most valuable area, and that is the red zone. So I think that is why it's appealing to play someone like Hopkins. You can get there on 1 reception. If it's a 4-yard touchdown at $4,400, that's probably going to work in this game that we're talking about. So I'm very interested in him. No interest in someone like Isaiah Pacheco, frankly.
Right.
And that's kind of the situation I wanted to look at a little bit when I talk about kickers. Harrison Butker at 5K or Isaiah Pacheco at 5,200. I think that's an absolute no-brainer. It's definitely Harrison Butker. But I think the interesting question is Harrison Butker versus Kareem Hunt. Hunt obviously has that range of outcome with scoring rushing touchdowns. But you look up and down a game log, like Hunt, for someone like Hunt, he scored a touchdown in 4 straight games. This is the most difficult matchup out there. Even while scoring touchdowns, he scored 8 fantasy points, 11.6. Like Butker puts up 11 fantasy points pretty frequently. So if Hunt doesn't land in the end zone, he's essentially drawing dead. And even if he does land in the end zone, I think Butker's going to match him here.
Yeah, as much as I kind of forwarded the idea of a Kareem Hunt captain, like I got to be honest, I think the Kansas City running game is going to be pretty bad. And Kareem Hunt's rushing yards total as of yesterday was around 44 and a half. I actually like the under. Pacheco's way under that. So again, if you think those touchdowns are going to go to potentially a Xavier Worthy with a pop pass or, some sort of gimmicky play or a Travis Kelce or a Noah Gray. But I love the Harrison Butker call as well, Mike. I think that makes a ton of sense. And people very shy to play kickers, especially when they see a point total that, is close to 50. Let's talk about Dallas Goedert real quick. Grey Goose Hayes, Meg says, speaking of Dallas, do you think he gets his over 52.5? It's pretty high. Your thoughts on Dallas Goedert, both with that prop and in DFS?
Yeah, I know it's kind of a popular pick, but I do really like it. He's had a very strong playoff run. We know you can attack the Chiefs in the middle, tight ends versus the Chiefs. I've done it all season. I'm not going to stop now. So yes, I do like Dallas Goedert in the prop market, and I do like him in DFS.
Mike, any comments on Goddard? And is there anybody else from a prop standpoint that you were staring down over the last week and a half that is also going to be in your DFS lineups?
Yeah, look, Goddard is definitely very firmly in play. Like he's, the question, and obviously what really is going to separate, who wins and who doesn't here is basically, getting the answer to that question right. And it's going to be, in my opinion, it's going to be Dallas Goedert or AJ Brown. It's going to be one of those two players that really exceeds their prop line for Philly. I'm very confident it's going to be one of those two players that does it. I'm going to be playing both, but Goddard fits. He's too cheap for the role that he has right now. So I like him a lot. Haven't bet his overs in a player prop market or anything like that, but mostly because I'm going to get all that exposure here in DFS. Now, I would say that if you want to be a little more contrarian, I think the most interesting pivot you can make in your lineup would be just manually swapping. I know the correlation doesn't line up at all, but manually swapping Hollywood Brown for Dallas Goedert. Hollywood Brown's a little cheaper. He certainly has the upside to exceed his point total there, but no one is projecting that, like not even close. So that's one that I will be making.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, a Hollywood Brown can certainly get loose anywhere, Meg. I have the part of the reason I love Xavier Worthy, and I mentioned it earlier, and why he's going to be in the captain spot, but also, I'm only going to make a handful of showdown lineups, but he'll be in the flex spot as well. I just think he can do so much near the line of scrimmage, which again, with this secondary that's very good for the Eagles, you don't have to worry about coverage when you're getting the ball a second after the snap, right? And that's what the Xavier Worthy experience has been. And, you kind of wait and see what he can do with it after the snap, with blocks being set up and using his speed and things of that nature. Is Xavier Worthy a guy that you're definitely going to have in your lineups, or are you willing to fade him?
No, I really Worthy and Kelsey are the high-priced Chiefs that I'm prioritizing. And then I love Mike's discussion about Butker, because I think Butker can outscore a lot of those guys in that range or slightly above or below him. So, and then it's Butker, and then the cheap Chiefs, that's hard to say, that I like are Noah Gray and Juju the best, but I would be willing to take shots on Hollywood Brown and Hopkins as well. But no, up top for the Chiefs, it's Kelsey and it's Worthy for me. They're who's soaking up the targets, and I think Mahomes is going to have to throw a lot in this game.
I think that's what we should do next. I like how you framed that, Meg. So let's do this, because we're only going to go like 30 minutes. We're already 22 in. Let's talk about some of our favorite players. And what I mean by that is players we're actually going to play in our lineups for each team. So Meg, you just framed the Kansas City Chiefs. It sounds like Worthy and Kelsey, maybe some Mahomes there too, but Butker, those are three players you really want to play. So let's stick with Kansas City, Mike. Maybe, 2, 3, 4 players that you're going to play in a lot of your showdown lineups on the Kansas City side.
It'll be Worthy, Butker, and Hollywood Brown will be probably the most prominent. I'll certainly have some Kelsey builds and be sprinkling in there, but for me, I'm going to be focused. Travis Kelce's clearly going to be a focus. He does have a great matchup, as good as it can possibly get really against this Eagles team. But for me, I like the speedsters. I like the quick timing routes, which we've seen, and stuff around the line of scrimmage to Worthy and Brown. And I like Harrison Butker. I think that he's really strong in a lot of scenarios. So if Philly plays really well defensively, where they're going to tighten up is going to be in that red zone. Kansas City's going to move the ball between the 20s. I think we have very little doubt about that. It's just going to come down to red zone efficiency. So in the lower scoring game, I think Butker's great. And in a shootout, I think Butker's great as well, because you're likely getting 3 touchdowns and at least a field goal, which is not going to kill you. Again, that 5K price tag scoring 7 points. I would, Pacheco's not scoring 7, Hunt's only scoring 7 with a touchdown. And the scenario where Hunt scores 20 is just so unlikely here for me. So Worthy, Butker, and Hollywood Brown, by far the biggest Chiefs exposures for me.
Okay, so let's go to biggest Eagles exposures. Meg, who do you got?
Well, up top, I said it that they'll be my 2 main captain plays. It's Saquon and Hurts. And then in the middle, there's actually not going to really be cheap plays for the Eagles, because just as you can tell, the way I'm kind of talking through some of the cheaper Chiefs plays that I'm playing. But it's those 2 guys up top. I think they could, again, soak up a lot of the touchdown equity for the Eagles, and it's Goddard. And so I may sprinkle in, a little bit of one with AJ Brown, one with Devonta Smith replacing Goddard or something along those lines. But I don't think I'm going to get to a lot of other Eagles, and they're just more condensed, obviously. So, and then their kickers had issues. So if I'm going to kickers, it's going to be Bucker over Elliott. I'm not saying Elliott couldn't outscore Bucker, but to me, I'm going to, with the volume of lineups I'm playing, I'm going to lean into the better kicker. So yeah, I really don't have a ton of other Eagles exposure. The only caveat I'll say is if for some reason, if Gainwell were to get ruled out, I think he's still going through concussion protocol. Maybe I'd take like a cheap swing on Will Shipley or something like that.
Yeah.
That would be only if Gainwell's ruled out.
Yeah, I'm looking at the cheap swings, and certainly if he's not playing, that would make sense. Grant Calcaterra is 1,000. Again, I'm Samaje Perine 1,200. Those are some of the cheaper players. Juju Smith-Schuster 2,000, and we know on a couple of plays Juju can just find himself in space. So I think those are some interesting options. My favorite Eagles, Mike, are probably. So I'm going to make a statement, and then I'm going to ask you a question off of that statement. Then I want to get your maybe your top 3 or 4 on the Eagles side. For me, it's probably AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts, and Dallas Goedert. That's a statement that doesn't have Saquon Barkley in it. So my question for you on the Showdown slate, especially for those that are new to Showdown, but I mean, really, I'd like to get your answer too, personally. Saquon Barkley is, I think a lot of people on a lot of slates would be like, oh, that's a lock button. You got to have Saquon Barkley in there. Is that really the case on a Showdown slate?
It's not the case on a Showdown slate. Now, the computer still wants to play a lot of them, but I'm definitely prioritizing both Mahomes and Hurts over Saquon for sure. Look, we know the upside that Jalen Hurts has in the running game. I think he's going to be forced to throw the ball a lot. And then Kansas City, they have no running game. They're not taking the ball out of Mahomes' hands. So it's either going to be Mahomes scoring touchdowns in some capacity, or it's going to be a ton of Harrison Butker field goals, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that I agree with you. For me, it's AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts. I'll have the most Hurts just because of the position he plays and, the floor. But I love AJ Brown. I think he's the best play from a skill position standpoint on the Eagles in this game. Look, I think that Devonta Smith, as much as I love him, I am actually worried about the hamstring. The way he plays, how hard he's going to be trying to play. It's a Super Bowl. A hamstring injury is not something that I want to play with on a receiver like that. So I think there's definitely a scenario that he doesn't finish the game. I know it's not something you're planning on necessarily, but I think that AJ Brown has got the most upside here.
All right. So another follow-up question there. First of all, I'd like, if you have a third Eagle that is fitting into builds, let me know. But is a 2-4 build with Hurts and AJ Brown and the other 4 being Kansas City Chiefs, is that in play for you?
Definitely. Okay. Have a lot of that.
Okay. And is there another Eagle that's kind of making their way into your optimal builds?
Dallas Goedert still is popping up a little bit there. And then the other one that I think is still sneaky is the Eagles defense. I just think there's a spot where it could be a lower scoring game. They're 200 more than Kansas City's defense. And I would still be fine playing receivers and everything against that defense.
All right. And maybe we'll close. If you have any questions in the chat, let us know. Maybe we'll close with this. I guess, what would be your favorite, Meg? I'll start with you. Your favorite contrarian game script, your favorite game script where you just don't think a lot of people are going to build around this and you could just get different that way.
I think my contrarian game script would be Eagles win by a touchdown or more.
Yeah.
And in that case, it would at least be 4-2 Eagles. So I think that would be it. Which Chiefs I'd bring it back with? Again, you have a lot of options. I'd have to ask Mike on that one. I don't know if that would make sense for Butker. Is it then they're having to go for 4th downs and you're not getting Butker, or does that make more sense that no, he's just kicking a lot of field goals and that's why they're falling behind a little more, and that's why some of the other skill position players aren't hitting the lineup. Do you have a take on that, Mike?
Yeah, I do. I think Butker would still be included there. And
I thought so too.
I think you kind of started alluding to it. I think that scenario, how that one plays out is, early in the game, first quarter, Kansas City settles for that 50-yard field goal, right?
Mhm.
It puts the 3 points on the board, which is more than 3 points in terms of fantasy points with Harrison Butker
Mhm.
for a 50-yard field goal. And then they maybe get another touchdown. You put them at 6 there. And that's the scenario that I could see getting there, because if
Mhm.
they are trailing by that amount, it means that Kareem Hunt has not scored already. So you're removing, those running back plays. Butker, again, it's a 50-yard field goal is essentially a rushing touchdown,
Yeah.
which is insane, but it is. So yeah, I think the Butker's still going to be included in that build.
In that build, would you be more inclined, Mike, to go 3-3 or 4-2?
Probably 3-3. Only because the Eagles are still very concentrated.
Mhm.
So I would probably pick Hurts and 2 skill position players and, try to nail down where those touchdowns are going. And then just looking for cheaper volume on the other side. So that's personally how I would do it.
Yeah, Butker and a couple of pass catchers in that case, it sounds like. Mike, is there a contrarian build that maybe we haven't discussed that you would consider building around?
Yeah, I think that the double kicker could be interesting. Double kicker defense. Look, the last time these teams met, we saw over 60 points. The total in this game is essentially 50. The Eagles defense is very good, and they run the football a lot. One thing Kansas City's done throughout this little dynasty run has been able to possess the football, right?
Mhm.
You've seen time and time again, they take half a quarter off the clock.
Mhm.
If that Eagles defense is stout and we land in field goals, there is a scenario here where the final score of this game is 20-17.
Yeah.
And if that happens, both kickers are involved. The defenses have likely done enough that if it comes down to like on the Eagles side, one or both of the touchdowns become Jalen Hurts rushing touchdowns. Saquon's not getting there. The receivers are probably not getting there. I think that is a scenario not many people are building for. And I actually think, despite seeing 60 plus points and a very real chance of seeing that again, I think there is a scenario that we get to halftime and the score at halftime is 7-3.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, I hope that's the case because I'm on the first half under. I put that on Sportsline over a week ago. All right, I think, listen, this show was more about, like, obviously we talked about plays, we talked about favorite plays, but I think it was really important to talk about, especially when it comes to showdown, like how we think about these builds and why we're fitting certain players in with others. I think that, especially when it comes to showdown, which I know is intimidating to me and intimidating to a lot of people out there, I think knowing what the line of thinking is and what the logic is more important than the plays themselves. I guess we got to close the show. This is kind of sad. I mean, closing 2025. Meg, I'm going to start with you. Any final thoughts as we head into best ball season, right? Any final thoughts?
I guess that does speak to me. Yes. First of all, I always have fun doing the show every Thursday with you two and Nada. So love that. Hope we can run it back next year.
Mhm.
Had a blast as always. The season went way too fast, by the way. I feel like this was the fastest season ever. So yes, I'm sad. I'm coping and I'm already in the best ball streets. So join me in the best ball streets. You'll see me on Underdog Fantasy.
You know why it went fast is because our team, the Commanders, wasn't getting dragged through the mud every week like it had for 30 years in a row.
That's probably it.
Kansas City's never dragged through the mud. Mike, I imagine these seasons fly by for you. Anyway, any final thoughts as we head into best ball season?
Yeah, flying by, having fun though. Obviously, go Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And the other thing I would say is if you want to continue to play DFS and you're watching this show, I know many of you have been with us for years, but if you are new and this was your first season, I highly recommend following us over into the DFS PGA streets because there's a lot you can learn from a sport like golf that doesn't require the investment and the time commitment that grinding NBA DFS or MLB every single day. So the fact that it's weekly, just like the NFL, I would highly recommend checking us out there. I know Sia and I obviously do a lot of DFS PGA. So definitely check that out. And we'll be back here grinding football again before you know it.
Yeah, we put out a lot of PGA on the early edge as well. And I'll just tell everybody there's an announcement coming within the next couple of weeks that very much pertains to golf betting and golf DFS that I think everybody's going to want to like dial in on. So I think that's good advice about PGA DFS. It's sort of a different analysis, but it's also very low invest. Like you can do a $3 lineup. It lasts 4 days. Like it is a fun sweat. It's different from NFL because it's a 4-day tournament. So I think that's some really good and fun advice there. Ladies and gentlemen, that'll wrap the 2025 season. We hope, or 2024-2025 season. We'll be back soon enough to talk this upcoming season. But thanks for joining us for every single show. Really appreciate everybody. I saw some recent reviews, which were really nice. If you want to review our podcast on Apple or Spotify, please go do it. But that's it for now. On behalf of Not on the Ones and Twos and Threes and Fours, and on behalf of Meg Schaup and Mike McClure, my name is Sia Najad. Have a great Super Bowl weekend, everybody. This is Fantasy Football Today, DFS.